kind of peace in war times. Let's get to it. Alright, listen to sound right reason before we get started. A few points should be made. 1, there were no 12 disciples. 2, the disciples were the 12 zodiac signs that Josephus personified into the Jews or the Hyksos of his time. 3, also Josephus added into the disciple story from what happened after Alexander the Greek invaded Egypt or Kemet in 333 BC to the time Caesarion Ptolemy the 15th Jesus was born. Here's what Amenubi Afra Una wrote in the Bible Interpretation and Explanation Booklet 2, 1968 AD concerning this topic. The earlier forms of Christianity, since the beginning of St. John, did not have the latter idea called the Immaculate Conception and the resurrection in the sense that it is taught in the West. However, original Christianity did start with the Osiris and Set legend, which is based on the true story about Abel and Cain. Christianity before that, based on Jesus 2,000 years ago, broke out around 560 or 600 BC. When the Phoenicians' power began to wane and Caucasian power began to wax, these earlier forms of Christianity started with Greek philosophers such as Pythagoras, Hippocrates, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, etc., who received their knowledge from the Egyptian mystery system that was headed by Egyptian priests, prophets, and other mystic men. Of course, the first and earliest form of Christianity started with Cain. The beginning of the loss of Egyptian power, freedom, and independence is when the Egyptians let Greeks and other Caucasians into their mystery system, from which they obtained vast knowledge, secrets, and activated names of gods and goddesses. The Egyptians had what was called mystery systems and also greater mysteries. The Phoenicians, later day Egyptians, took the Caucasians into their confidence, and that was the beginning of the end of Egyptian power and rule. All right, so I'm going to go back to this real quick. Here, Afra Unu says that the original Christianity did start with the Osiris and Set legend, which is, based upon true story about Abel and Cain, which we already went into that Adam and Eve were Hindu priests and nuns that was under Amenubi Re Harakti, who was known as Brahma to them, who was the sun god or Jupiter incarnated into him at that time. I already broke a lot of this stuff down, videos back. So you should equal stand that what he trying to Menez, that's one of the first pharaoh of the first dynasty, that's the same one. And it's saying that once the Adam and Eve group were kicked out to the Asian islands, that's now the Osiris and Set story starts with that, which means that the Set and Osiris story is only 6,000 years old, and that means that's when Osiris came into existence when Summer 6 Ether died and Ghost God, aka Osaru, Usia or whatever, Ghost God became into the planet from the sun. All right. Alexander the Great, that is the Greek, was a member of the Egyptian mystery systems, and by the time he came on the scene around 333 BC, the way was clear for just about anything the Caucasian wanted to put forth, and this is why Alexander was able to march unopposed into Egypt, Eastern and Northern Africa, and elsewhere. Although Alexander had sworn his alliance and allegiance to the objectives of the Egyptian mystery system, of which he was a member, he was also a member of a vast clandestine spy system of Caucasians whose aim was to deceive and deprive the Phoenicians of their ruling power and independence. The first member of the spy ring to join the mystery system was the first Caucasian accepted into the mystery system, because that is the nature of the Caucasian, to deceive and spy on darker people. The Caucasian spy ring was the key that opened and cleared the way for Alexander's march. Once the Caucasians were admitted into the mysteries of Egypt, of course, the power they received would be or would turn adverse like the Caucasians were, and that adverse power was enough to make the spy system successful by help of the moon god, which is Tahuti or Thoth, right? Hermes. Caucasian women and some of the Phoenicians themselves were spellbound by the moon god. So now, there's another thing for those who had these books for a long time. Look what he says. He says that the power they received would be or would turn adverse like the Caucasian were. So before the Caucasians started calling on these, activating names of these gods, right? The same gods that the Phoenicians and our people was calling on, Ra, all of these different gods, Tahuti, Thoth, Ma'at, all these different deities and forces, they became whatever the nature of the group that was calling on them. So again, that's part of the cycle. So once these corrupt Caucasians start calling on these gods and incarnating them and using them for whatever, those gods became the same as them. Okay, moving forward. Alexander the Greek was falsely built up as a great conqueror, but he was a fake who the Caucasian spy system chose to take the bows for the work the spy system had done. However, most Greek philosophers and members of the spy system, who were also members of the mystery system, met with ill fate for their deceit and broken vows to the laws of the mysteries. The philosophy they taught was from darker peoples and foreign to their people, and their people were afraid of it at first, and the teachers of the new philosophy who were not put to death died in shame and disgrace, including Alexander, who died of intemperance, drunkenness, at the early age of 32. The Alexandrian Christian schools in Egypt that started around 300 BC and were named in honor of Alexander the Greek produced such early Christians and Reformed Jews as the Stoics, Gnostics, Essenes, Zealots, and others who lasted until the advent of Jesus and for a time after. But the Essenes, who were also called Zealots, and some others became a part of Jesus' followers. Listen to Sound Right Reason. Remember, Esau Panthera Caesarion falsely called Jesus part of Phoenician and Roman Caucasian in modern terms. The Phoenician race is the original mankind race, but second to the Ethiopian African race, who are the primary human race. The Hindu is a branch of the Phoenician race, and science is called human paleontology, the study of prehistoric human and proto-human fossils, original or primitive. Refer to this book. Phoenician Origins of Britain, Scots, and Anglo-Saxons by L.A. Wado. He was born May 29th, 1854, and passed September 9th, 1938. That book is an awesome piece of literature. Alexander the Greek, who invaded Kemet, Egypt, made Ethiopian and Phoenician Egyptian knowledge available to others through deception, caused Jews and black Phoenicians who were scattered were waiting and looking for Caesarion Ptolemy the 15th, Esau Panthera, falsely called Jesus, to return. These groups, Amenubi Rakapata Afron, spoke of in verse 31, book 2, 1968. Let's relook at them. So let me clarify this point again. Once Alexander allowed these people to come in, the Greek philosophers and all, they start taking this information from Alexandria, which is, he renamed it, which is really Phoenician and African information that was stored up. They had thousands of years of information in those pyramids and stuff like that, the libraries, and they started teaching it. And then again, I told you, the Hyksos Jews, they information that they got when they was living in Kemet was from the Memphite theology and other great sciences that we had already put down. And then the Phoenicians who invaded Kemet after the 6th dynasty took a lot of information and added on to it. So by the time Alexander got in there, like you said, we just read that a lot of they people didn't understand the knowledge. So not only did they throw a lot of their philosophers in jail and kill them or made them go against the grain, a lot of them whitewashed information. So when y'all hear in school, for those who went to, high school, went to college, you start hearing these lies saying that, the Greeks were the fathers of philosophy. That's a lie. Because if y'all was the father of philosophy, you wouldn't teach anything that came from y'all and your people's afraid of it. That means when they philosophers were put in jail and locked in house arrest till they died, that's because they brought information that put their people to shame, and they was jealous and afraid. That's how that always is. They say people always what? Fear what they don't understand. And they couldn't understand how darker peoples who were here before them had all of this great knowledge. And this is why when you hear about these philosophers, when they write about things that we did, remember we had lost our power by the time the Greeks got there. And the Romans came after that. We had long, right at the beginning of when the Caucasian, when the Adam and Eve group was kicked out 6,000 years ago, we had King Amenubi King Amenubi Ray Harakti, all right, who was there 6,000 years ago. All between him and then Khufu, they called Cheops, who came around 5,000 years ago, 5,000 years, BC. From him was like the last great pharaoh we had that ruled Africa, Asia, and Europe. All right, so our power started slowly, becoming small and smaller as we got up to this day and time. All right, but that's now being restored. All right, let's relook at these mystery schools. The school of history, the Stoic school, was founded around 300 BC by Zeno of Citium. All right, according to this, they said he was born 334 BC, died somewhere between 262 BC, age 71 or 72. Hellenistic philosophy. Hellenistic just means that they took knowledge that the African Ethiopian race and the Phoenician mankind race, and they put their Greek twist on it. The same way they took the Jews Hyksos information and made a Hellenized version of the Old Testament and New Testament, meaning they put their Greek mind to it and they understand it, which was lesser. All right, a voracious reader of Socratic dialogues, who also studied under the Senate crates and was influenced by the teaching of Plato's Academy. And the Megarian school, the Stoa, competed with the school founded only a little before in Athens by Epicurus, and Stoic and Epicurean views are often compared and contrasted. Zeno was succeeded in the leadership of the Stoa first by Clinthus of Assos and then by Chrysippus of Soli, who heads the school from around 230 until 206 BCE and was by all accounts its foremost theorist and synthesizer. Following Chrysippus, the position of the scholarch passed to his former students, the last of which being Diogenes of Babylon in the middle of the 2nd century BCE. Side notes: the Phoenicians were dark-skinned invaders of Kemet, Egypt after the 6th dynasty. They were looking for Esau, Panther, Caesarion to come and unite them back like it was during the time of Thutmose I in the 18th dynasty, which is 1506 or 1504 BCE to 1493 BCE, according to Wikipedia. That's roughly 1206 years before the Stoics. Notice Zeno is Caucasian. This will prove to be a problem, as the writings of Amenubi Rakapata in the Bible reflected. That will be explained later. But at this junction, we will say his race proved to be a big issue. Let's move on. The Gnostics. Gnosticism, from ancient Greek, Romanized Gnostikos, coined Greek, having knowledge, is a collection of religious ideas and systems that coalesced in the late 1st century AD among Jewish and early Christian sects. These various groups emphasize personal spiritual knowledge above the Orthodox teachings. So when they say around the early Christian sects, we're talking about Christianity, which started around Alexandria time. We're talking about 300 some BC. So they still missing thousands of years of information. So this is, remember, religion came out of pantheism, and which is the worship of many gods, and went from pantheism to mono. So a lot of information was coded, written a certain way that only those who was in these schools really knew what it was. But for the majority at hand, a lot of them was just following this stuff and not really knowing where it was coming from. Above the Orthodox teaching, tradition, and authority of religious institution, Gnostic cosmology generally presents a distinction between a supreme hidden God and a malevolent lesser divinity. sometimes associated with Yahweh. The Old Testament was responsible for creating the material universe. Consequently, Gnostics considered material existence flawed or evil and held the principal element of salvation to be direct knowledge of the hidden divinity attained via mystical or esoteric insight. Many Gnostic texts not in concepts of sin and repentance, but with illusion and enlightenment. All right. Etymology: Gnosis refers to knowledge based on personal experience or perception. In a religious context, Gnosis is mystical, esoteric knowledge based on direct participation with the divine. In most Gnostic systems, the sufficient cause of salvation is the knowledge of acquaintance with the divine. It is an inward knowing comparable to the encouraged by Platonist Neoplatonism and differs from proto-Orthodox Christian views. Gnostics are those who are oriented toward knowledge and understanding or perception and learning as a particular modality for living. The usual meaning of Gnosticos in classical Greek texts is learned or intellectual, such as used by Plato in the comparison of practicos and intellectual or gnosticisticos. Plato's use of learn is fairly typical of classical texts. Let's look at Neoplatonism and what it taught. All right, he was born 204 205 Christian era, died 270 in the Roman Empire. All right, let's look at the one. Platonists taught that there is a supreme, totally transcendent one containing no division, multiplicity, or distinction. Beyond all categories of being and non-being, his one cannot be any existing thing, nor is it merely the sum of all things. Compare the Stoic doctrine of this belief in non-material existence, but is prior to all existence. Platonists identified his one with the concept of good and the principle of beauty. Remember, they got this information out of Kemet around 300 some. Matter of fact, all of you go back, because you had some Greek philosophers that was over there like 500 some BC. But as time moved forward, as it got closer to the Christian era and Alexander and all of them coming in there, they ended up, again, these groups started crunching this stuff into mysteries, and you couldn't get the truth unless you joined. So a lot of this information is how religion is ran today, that if you just a basic adherent that goes to a church building or to a mosque or to a synagogue or something like that, you don't get the high education unless you join some of these secret religious occult groups, you know, or some other people go to universities and study. But again, the basic information, most of the people that just read the books and go home, they have no idea the many layers of this. All right, so when he talking about the one, they're not, you know, again, this is why people in religion came out of and was influenced heavily by what they would call Greek philosophy. That's why you would see stuff in the Bible and Old Testament, our Lord God is one, is only one God, and you hear religious people say that all the time. It's one God, one. He don't share partners. It's only, you understand, because they're taking this stuff from the philosophies, and the philosophies took it from somewhere else. And a lot of the people that's modern day, if you ain't into Greek philosophy and studying, you know, the history of this stuff, you never know that this stuff was what religion was striving against until they was able to get to 325 AD and pretty much crush and write out and suppress the Greek philosophy, which they got from Kemet out of Egypt. All right, here's one concept: incapacitated thinking object. Even the self-contemplating intelligence, the gnosis of the nous, must contain duality. Once you have uttered the good, add no further thought by any addition, and in proportion to that addition, you introduce a deficiency. Pontius denies sentiency, self-awareness, or any other action ergon to the one. Rather, if we insist on describing it further, we must call the one a sheer potentiality dynamis, without which nothing could exist. As Pontius explains in both places and elsewhere, it is impossible for the one to be being or a self-aware creator God. Pontius compared the one to light, the divine intellect, nous. Nous first, will towards good, to the sun, and lastly the soul, psyche, to the moon, whose light is merely a derivative of conglomeration of light from the sun. The first light body exists without any celestial body. So they dropping clues and stuff right here, which we're going to get into this a little later. But if you been paying attention, especially in my Revelation books, it breaks down about how Nupu, as nous, first emanates out of the sun, the same way Zeus, or the secondary primary logos, emanates what? Out of the sun. All right, listen to sound right reason. What Mr. Plotinus was describing, two things: one, the supreme being is the one being referenced in noon science, and two, the noesis of the nous is nupu. Noesis is defined as purely intellectual apprehension. Platonism, the highest kind of knowledge or knowledge of the eternal forms or ideas, contrasted with Dianoa. Excuse me. The subjective aspect of the act of an intentional experience. Excuse me. Distinguished from noema, cognition, especially when occurring through direct knowledge. All right. Listen, that means having direct contact with sound right reason or nature in general. This is what Alfred Uno was born with, 9 mind, direct knowledge. Listen to reason. There are many gods, but only one supreme being, and that one supreme being is infinite, eternal, unique, almighty, absolute nature. When one speaks of the God in nature or in grace apart from the personal and individual gods and goddesses in nature, he or she speaks of the nature of nature. This is another name or description of the one supreme being. For the nature of nature is the God in nature, and also called the God of gods. And this writer repeats, there are many gods, but only one supreme being, or the nature of nature, or the God of gods. All right? And that is unique, absolute, almighty nature. Introduction to the Nature of Nature, Book 1, page 81 in part. This title, God of Gods, can also be found in the book of Daniel 4:27. And the king answered Daniel and said, truly your God is the God of gods, the Lord of kings, and a revealer of secrets, since you could reveal this secret. Now we move on to noesis, to nous definition. Noesis is, again, intellect, intelligence, 1820 from the Greek noesis, intelligent thought, for knowing, to see, perceive, have mental perception, for nous, mind, thought, which is of uncertain origin. Again, when they start doing that, remember, they don't want to reveal that they got this from darker peoples. When you start hearing that in certain instances, okay, some cases they don't know the origin, but a lot of times they do, and they can't tell you that we was the physical source of this intelligence. All right, purely intellectual apprehension, Platonism, the highest kind of knowledge, the knowledge of the eternal forms of ideas. All right, Nupu is pure intelligence. Listen to the reason. Intelligence recognizes correct information, and when it sees it, hear it, or reason it out, done by someone else who possesses intelligence, or by the person who is seeking and searching for knowledge. The marks of intelligence are finding knowledge, recognizing knowledge when it is spoken or written, understanding knowledge, all using it wisely. Truth is knowledge, any knowledge, and all knowledge, and knowledge is correct information. Therefore, truth is correct information. This writer was and is naturally inspired, qualified, and authorized by Nupu, the original creator in nature and by nature, to find liberation knowledge, write it, and circulate it so that it can do indeed what it's supposed to do. Introduction to the Nature of Nature, Book 1, page 17 in part. Nupu is called nous. Nupu is called nous in the American English Dictionary and writings about Neoplatonism in the Encyclopedia. Nous, pronounced nous, whose right name is Nupu, is intellect, pure intelligence, and sound right reason. Nupu, nous, is the original creator of the universes and the original persons, places, and also things therein, because the power source of Nupu are the suns of the cosmos, also called the true stars. Let it be remembered always, let it be known. Introduction to the Nature of Nature, Book 1, pages 17 through 18. The word nous is found in the New Testament under the word mind. It appears 24 times in the New Testament. The Greek Strong's number is 3563, and it means mind, understanding, reason. It's a masculine. Phonetic spelling, nous. Definition: mind, understand, reason. The mind, the reason, reasoning faculty, intellect. The next school of thought was the Essenes. Origins. The origins of Gnosticism are obscure and still disputed. The proto-Orthodox Christian groups called Gnostics, a heresy of Christianity, but according to the modern scholars, the theology's origin is closely related to Jewish sectarian milieux and early Christian sects. Scholars debate Gnosticism's origins as having roots in Neoplatonism and Buddhism due to the similarities in beliefs, but ultimately its origins are currently unknown as Christianity developed and became more popular. Remember, all of this came out of Kemet, and it was based on the Osiris and Set legend, all right, which is the reimagined and hidden version of the Adam and Eve group that got kicked out of India, which is the Gulf of Aden. They was over there. They was in the Gulf of Aden under Yemen. They were kicked out of that garden from to the Aegean Islands. Excuse me. All right. The Gnostic belief was widespread within Christianity until the proto-Orthodox Christian community expelled the group in the 2nd and 3rd centuries AD. Gnosticism became the first group to be declared heretical. Some scholars prefer to speak of Gnosticism when referring to 1st century ideas that later developed into Gnosticism, and to reserve the term Gnosticism for the synthesis of these ideas into a coherent movement in the 2nd century. According to James M. Robinson, no Gnostic texts clearly predate Christianity, and pre-Christian Gnosticism such is hardly attested and way to settle the debate once and for all. Jewish Christianity origins. Origins of Christianity and split of Christianity and Judaism. Contemporary scholarship largely agrees that Gnosticism has Jewish Christian origins, originating in the late 1st century AD in non-rabbinical Jewish sects and early Christian sects. As Ethel S. Drower adds, heterodox Judaism in Galilee and Samaria appears to have taken shape in the form we now call Gnostic, and it may well have existed in some time before the Christian era. Many heads of Gnostic schools were identified as Jewish Christians by church fathers, and Hebrew words and names of God were applied in some Gnostic systems. The cosmogonic speculation among Christian Gnostic had partial origins in Maseh Bereshit and Maseh Merkabah. These theses mostly notably put forward by Gershom Scholem, 1897 and 1982, and Gillis Quispel, 1916 to 2006. Scholem detected Jewish Gnostics in the imagery of the Merkabah, which can also be found in certain Gnostic documents. Quispel cites Gnosticism as an independent Jewish development, tracing its origins to Alexandrian Jews, to which group Valentinus was also connected. So when we start talking about Alexandria, that's going back to what? 300 BC or a little earlier, because we're talking about 333. Remember, Alexander went over there and hijacked the Phoenician mystery school, which they got it from us, and renamed the library Alexandria. So again, the Jews were in Alexandria during this time, all right? And it was not their first time being in Kemet. So of course they took information that they learned, and that's how stuff got broken up into all these different groups, and people was trying to, figure out what's going on. So when you read these groups' belief system, they're very abstract. Many of the Neg Hammadi texts make reference to Judaism, in some cases with violent rejection of the Jewish God. And the Jewish God was Set. When they was in Kemet the first time, they was worshiping Set. Only Set, under their pharaoh Apophis or Poppy. All right. Gershom Scholem once described Gnosticism as the greatest case of metaphysical anti-Semitism, Professor Stephen Bamey said Gnosticism would be better characterized as anti-Judaism. Recent research into the origins of Gnosticism shows a strong Jewish influence, particularly from the Hekkalot literature. Alexandria was of central importance for the birth of Gnosticism. The Christian Ecclesia Congregation Church was of Jewish Christian origin, but also attracted Greek members, and various strands of thought were available, such as Judaic apocalypticism, speculation on divine wisdom, Greek philosophy, and Hellenistic mystery religion. See, all this came out of Kemet. Once Alexander got in there and did that, that's what all this stuff broke up into all these different groups. So people, when they talk about the Essenes and Nazarenes, all these so-called secret groups all the way back to the Old Testament, all of this stuff came from them taking dark people information and repackaging it, and different pharaohs and different rulers, people taking this stuff and running with it. And they remember, this is all between 300 something BC all the way to 47 BC. This foolishness was going on. All right, a zealot and zealous redirect here. For other UC zealot, the zealots were a political movement in the 1st century Second Temple Judaism, which sought to incite the people of Judea province to rebel against the Roman Empire and expel it from the Holy Land by force of arms, most notably during the First Jewish-Roman War, 66 to 70 AD. Zealotry was the term used by Josephus for a fourth sect or fourth Jewish philosophy during this period. Once again, this is got again, a lot of the Bible is mixed up because of this man here and his strong pimp hand when it came to writing stuff, especially drawn from the Old Testament and all these other groups, and creating certain things in the New Testament. All right, so this is going to be part 1, and then we're going to start with part 2 right after this. Tremendous call of peace in wartime.